Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am their host that you hear every Monday. Ethan, I hope everyone's having a wonderful day, start of their day, end of their day, middle of the day if you're working right now and you're not furloughed or you weren't getting paid time off or whatever due to the COVID crisis. If you're out there working and you're allowed to listen to podcasts while you work and you enjoy college football and you're here, thank you for listening. If you are at home, furloughed or, just at home and listening, thanks for listening. If you're on your way to work, on your way to somewhere else, hopefully socially distanced and safe, in the car, thank you for listening. We have a lot to cover today as there's a lot of things going on within our college football universe that has some strong implications on whether or not we may have a season or not, because things are not looking good, fellas. Things are not looking good across the board, at least to me. And a lot of the stuff that's been coming out of the news is very troubling, and we do have to talk about it. But first, we're going to do some SI All-American rankings. So from SI, there's been some rankings about some potential high school running back studs in the class of 2021, and they're ranking the top 10 running backs from said class. So we're just going to go over and look through and see what we find. So this is from John Garcia Jr., and this was earlier in the week this was written. But first on the list of some of the best ahead of the 2020 football season is Travion Henderson from Hopesville. My bad, not Hopesville, Hopeswell. So he's 5'10", 185 pounds, and he's committed to Ohio State, the Ohio State. So there wasn't much discussion at the top of this list considering Henderson's athletic profile. The state champion sprinter has just about every ideal tool for a back in the modern age with the tape and production to back it up. Coming off a 3,000-yard, 50-plus touchdown 2019. So yeah, we're getting into the Derrick Henry territories again. But the future Buckeye has breakaway speed, balance, vision, patience, and the gaudy production to his name. His bounce and acceleration paired for a chunk potential both in between the tackles and outside, with his subtle wiggle and open field speed to make him a true problem for tacklers in space as he continues to fill out his frame. Something he's working on before enrolling into Ohio State, of course. And Henderson is a candidate for immediate playing time anywhere, even in Columbus. So coming to Ohio State, Travion Henderson, he might be a name that we need to keep an eye on just in case he blows up in the intermediate leagues. We can't say the big leagues yet because the big leagues is where you make the dollars. So number 2, Kamar Wheaton from Garland, Texas, and Lakeview Centennial High School, I believe. 5'11", 195 pounds. So he's considering LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, and SMU among others. So the Texan could very well be the fastest running back on the list from a football or track and field perspective. Wheaton has some of the most head-turning juice in the class when it comes to explosiveness and breakaway ability at any position. His one-cut style and rock-solid frame also make for a decisive back, going for big yardage without wasted movement. Running with a great lean and behind his pads, the strike zone for defenders is maintained to a minimum inside the box or not. Wheaton has the tools to compete in a passing game as well, and with elite speed and some subtle elusiveness in the open field, including dynamic jump cuts. So you should really look him up because I feel like his tape is pretty exceptional. So keep in mind, he has not committed anywhere yet, but just a reminder, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, and SMU from the Texas native. Number 3 on this list is Will Shipley from Matthews, North Carolina, Weedington High School. 5'11", 200 pounds, committed to Clemson. So he's a big dude. Shipley may be projected as the top 3 down back in the class of 2021. He possesses track speed and home run ability from any position on the field, inside, outside, in the passing game or return game. He has the vision and lateral strength to stress the defensive edge in the outside zone game, along with one-cut swiftness to break down defenders in the open field, or as a pass catcher. So lower body power and center of gravity is also on the ideal fronts relative to his age, and his power will complement the open field speed at over 200 pounds sooner rather than later. Also an elite lacrosse recruit as a goal-scoring midfielder, re-emphasizing quickness and overall field awareness. So Shipley has the versatility and talent to see early playing time and even at a place like Clemson. So once again, he's a Clemson commit, and he sounds like somebody who would very much easily replace Travis Etienne. Wink, wink. He might be there. So number 4 is Evan Pryor from Cornelius, North Carolina, Williams Atmos Hugh. 5'11", 190 pounds. So he's committed to Ohio State. So another piece for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes to soon showcase out of the backfield. So Pryor contends with Shipley among the top skill position prospects coming out of North Carolina this cycle. And he possesses 3-down ability to line up with the modern ask of the position with great quickness and plenty of top-end speed to go along with open field awareness and strong hands. So Pryor plays a sturdy vertical game in between the tackles, but features flashes of elusiveness and occasional offhand power in the open field. As he adds mass in Columbus, he can serve as a change of pace type relatively early before becoming the centerpiece of the running back or the running attack down the line. Number 5 is Amari Daniels from Miami, Florida, Central High School. So 5'8", 190, and he's considering Miami, Georgia, Texas A&M, Nebraska, and other schools. So he has not boiled down his decision yet. Showcasing years of success against top-tier competition in South Florida, the Miami native is among the shiftiest backs in the country. Daniels plays with great urgency, impressing the hole and getting into the second and third level, where he is virtually untouchable for the assigned defender in space. He sets up would-be tacklers with natural speed cut ability and lateral power to bounce wide at will. Good vision, scrappy grit, balance, and above average long speed, which makes a slight yet muscular build. Daniels has the physical tools to factor into the passing game and turn his quicker than fast style into 3-down services at the next level. Number 6 is JoJo Early from Aldo, Texas High School. So he's 5'9.5" and 170 as far as the weight. He's committed to LSU. Now, that's an interesting, I've never seen somebody be labeled as 5'5" on one of these rankings, but SI All-American garnered plenty of questions regarding Early when releasing the inaugural slot receiver rankings, but now his absence on the list should make more sense because truly the most versatile runner on the list, the future Tiger can live up in the backfield and in the slot interchangeably. In a modern offense, his build and head-turning agility will be utilized in more than one spot, but his ability to impact a front seven from a run defense and a coverage standpoint from the backfield could be too intriguing to place at another primary position. Early is simply dynamic with the football in his hands, with great vision, elusiveness, and anticipation in tight windows. The type of traits an offensive coordinator builds touches for in each offensive game plan, and the true quickness and feel for getting hit by defenders will help Early factor into the return game as well. So committed to LSU, but he sounds a lot like Saints all-star running back Alvin Kamara because of the being able to split out wide and go into the slot and have that ability to run routes. So what a skill set of that young man. Number 7 is Armani Goodwin from Truesville, Alabama, from Hewitt-Truesville High School. 5'8", 190, and he's committed to Auburn. So despite fighting an injury bug for most of the prep level, all Goodwin has done in the highest classification in Alabama is produce. From a freshman playoff performance of 393 yards in one 2017 game to put his name on the map, he's thick and sturdy back that has impressed. He has always possessed breakaway speed, running sub 10.8 seconds as an incoming high school freshman, and has maintained that pace despite adding good muscle and mass since. Where Goodman has grown within his game in recent years is his efficiency. So projection as a nonsense north-south runner with one-cut quickness in a wash, as well as in space. Natural leverage, lower body power, and some of the most impressive contact balance in the class makes him a threat for the sticks as well beyond on every touch. Assuming health stability, this will also be an ideal fit for Auburn's power rushing attack. So look out for him because it sounds like he has something going and he's a big, strong back that has good balance. Number 8 is Brendan Barrow from Clearwater, Florida Academy International. So 5'8", 175 pounds, and he's considering Stanford, Duke, Northwestern, Rutgers, and other. So another player built for the modern age at the position. Few tapes are as fun as Barrow's in that case, so some prospects lean speed over quickness while others flip that script, but the Canada native has elite traits in both departments. The acceleration and deceleration skill is elite, leading to make people miss a lot, basically. He has some make 'em miss elusiveness in the smallest of windows, despite the ability to run most assigned to track him down. He spends most of a chunk of his time on Friday nights lined up out wide or in the slot with steady hands and better route construction than some Power 5 receiver prospects to boot. So the only knock there is a lack of bell cow experience, something that will be countered in 2020, considering he will be the focal point of the entire CAI offense. So we'll see what he's able to do with more touches coming his way. Number 9 is Corey Keener from Cincinnati, Ohio, from Roger Bacon High School. He's 5'10" and 205, committed to LSU. The second pledge to the national champs on this list, the Ohioan, is a physically imposing presence with serious lower body power and mass to his name. Keener allows to translate to quicker than fast athleticism, a great center of gravity, and the type of contact balance that enables him to break tackles without losing speed or momentum. This is one-cut ability and display of true bouncing skill at play with true suddenness, jump cut specialist with an offhand straight arm in the toolbox. So Keener is just tough to bring down regardless of the contact point, and while he isn't built to blow the top off on defenses, he can factor into the passing game with that COD speed and strong hands. And number 10 is Cameron Valdez from Rockdale, Texas High School. 6'10", 187 pounds, and he's considering Texas Tech, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, TCU, Nebraska, and others. So if there are any readers tracking these rankings who prefer old school throwback style, Valdez is your guy, basically. He's an uncommitted Texan, has the vision and downhill ability that would have shined in the I form years ago. So he's kind of a throwback guy with the combination of quickness and acceleration to carry the ball 20 plus times each time out in the game. Few run with better lean or display more patience in the hole than the rising senior, and also has a fight for every yard grit longtime football fans would appreciate. His elusiveness, he's elusive enough to play production ball in the spread era, considering his quickness and footwork, and Valdez also showcases football IQ and setting up blockers as well as would-be tacklers in small windows. So that is your top 10 to look forward to for the next few seasons in high school to see where these guys end up landing as far as their individual seasons. And it's always great to look at what is up to come down the pipeline for future collegiate work, because that's how we know who is our 5-stars or 4-stars or 3-star recruits. And we have to make sure that we know who's coming in and what are we getting, because if we don't, what are we doing here, right? We're just hoping a kid will end up being good. So we got to look at the tape just like everybody else, and we got to make sure we're up on our knowledge. So that is Cameron Valdez, that is Corey Keener, Brandon Barrow, Armani Goodwin, JoJo Early, Armari Daniels, Evan Pryor, Will Shipley, Kamar Wheaton, Travion Henderson for your top 10 2021 running back class coming out of high school. We're going to take our first break now and come back talking some more college football. We're going to be talking about some SEC schedule news that's coming up, GSMC.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, welcome back to GSMC College Football Podcast. And last Friday, the SEC announced their 10-game schedule that included 2 more SEC opponents. As we all know, that the SEC is playing 0 non-conference games this year, and we know just how polarizing that was for many different reasons, as in we are not going to get the ACC-SEC rivalry game this year. And, you know, the SEC played 4D chess in pulling out the news that they were going to allow 1 non-conference game, but they did not specify whether or not that would be with the SEC or not. And this was when the SEC was basically rumored to announce that they were not going to play any non-conference games. And then the ACC decided to get ahead of the game and basically say it's not our fault that the SEC doesn't want to basically play these games. It's not our fault that these games are canceled, and that's what the ACC basically tried to accomplish. And it was a big brain move, galaxy brain move decision by the ACC, and a little bit of the PR game, right? Everything has a game to it. The PR game, the politics game, and the ACC got ahead of the game, and the SEC was not very happy about that. But alas, we do have the SEC schedule out there, and the 2 new teams added to each team has been announced, and some of them are really, really bad as far as who got what, and some guys really got the short end of the stick there, and we're going to cover all of that right here, right now. So, you know, the conference used teams' original 8 opponents to craft most of the fair and complete schedule as possible, and whether the league used a fancy computer program or confusing calculus metrics or playing common sense, the conference officials did attempt to strike a balance with each team's 10-game schedule, but we're not here to talk about all 10 games. We're here to talk about 2 of them and all parts of a big puzzle. So there's some winners and some losers here. So number 1 on the winners list is LSU. So LSU is going to be at Vanderbilt, and they're going to get Missouri at home. So the defending national championship Tigers get to play Vanderbilt, where they rolled up 66 points on them last season, and it was a drubbing. It was pretty bad. And now the Cajuns are coming back to town with the same sort of vigor and the same sort of idea that they are going to try and defend this national title with the most competence and swagger that LSU has had since they won the national championship. Well, probably since 2011, should I say. Not since they've won the national championship. So LSU is a rejuvenated program. They've always been good, but they hadn't had the no one can touch me swagger in a long time. So just look to see this not work out well for Vanderbilt. I just have to say that. And of course, they play Missouri at home, and Missouri has a brand new coach, but Ed Orgeron began his head coaching tenure against Missouri in a home game back in 2016 where they beat them down 42-7. So, hey, listen, not everybody's built to win right now. And Vanderbilt and Missouri, I don't think they can compete with LSU right now, so it's just not a good look for them. But unfortunately, Missouri is not done getting beat down. So Alabama gets to play at Kentucky, and they get to play Kentucky at home, and they go to Missouri to play Missouri. So Missouri has to play LSU and Alabama this season. So this is bad for them. That's not good. So the Tide gets to welcome in Kentucky that while on the rise, Mark Stoops is still, Kentucky. And the Wildcats are they're typically known for their basketball rather than their football, but it doesn't really matter what type of ball that they're playing with because the Crimson Tide will probably be the 3 touchdown favorites. And even if players opt out, Alabama probably will still have the favorites and be able to cover a 4-point or 14-point spread. That's pretty harsh, but it's the truth. Georgia gets to play at Arkansas, and they'll get Mississippi State at home. So that might sound familiar because it looks like what the rotational opponents would be for the next few years. So Georgia, in fact, got its next 2 rotational opponents. So it was kind of like they were going to host Arkansas in 2021, and they were going to play at Mississippi State at 2022. So it's kind of weird. They flip-flopped how that was going to work, but it's the same 2 opponents. So the league swapped the sites, and then boom, Georgia gets to end up with 2 teams that lost a combined 13 SEC games last season. So not very good. Not very good. But those are your winners, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. Who would have thought that they would not be winners? Who knows? But Arkansas, loser. They play Florida. They play at Florida, and they play Georgia at home. So, of course, it's not enough that their schedule already features division foes of LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, and Auburn, but now they get to face Florida and Georgia, the 2 who most likely would be to win the SEC East if the season does happen. So it's the strongest 2020 football schedule, and it's not even close. It's not even close. It's probably the strongest in the history of college football. And I would just be in pain if it was me. It's not good. It's not a good lifestyle for them. And I feel for everyone else involved on the Arkansas staff because you couldn't have drawn up a worse draw up than that. Florida, then Georgia, when you already have LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, and Auburn, you're placing every top class SEC program in the conference. That is pain. That is some real pain. So if you're an Arkansas fan, I feel for you. Maybe you're thinking of better things to do with your time right now than worrying about Arkansas' schedule. But if you aren't, I feel for you. That is some pain. Missouri gets Alabama and LSU like we talked about. So unfortunately, Missouri is the worst stick out of the bunch. So league officials felt so badly about Missouri's postseason ban last year that they handed them another postseason ban this year. Half of their 10-game schedule is Alabama, Florida, which is away, LSU, which is away, Georgia and Tennessee, which is away, and that's just pain. So that's where you have it. When Mizzou and Arkansas have to play a schedule at the end of the season, and schedule date may end up changing, they both will be so beaten and battered that they may have to switch to an 8-man football team rule. So it's not looking pretty for some of those guys, but that is your schedule and new addition, should I say, to said schedule. So who do you think is going to come out of the SEC East or the SEC West? I feel. Let me know via social media. Hit us up at GSMC College Football, GSMC College Football on Facebook. Let me know who do you think is going to come out of the SEC East and West with these two additional opponents. I'm still of the mindset that I believe that Georgia still is the most talented in the SEC East, and it's kind of not close. And unless something catastrophic happens within the SEC or just the country as a whole when it comes to college football, if they do end up playing with opt-outs alone and also with, hopefully people don't start, contracting COVID, or teams may have to sit down mid-season games. If everything was a perfect world, I think that Georgia would be they would be the first choice in many people's eyes to be able to go ahead and do what they need to do to get to the SEC championship. And I think coming out of the West, there's a lot of options. Now, remember, don't be fooled, right? We seem to forget things when maybe in January when we were seeing how things were shaking out, and then we got to March and things, everybody forgot because of coronavirus, respectively. LSU was basically ranked 10th coming out of the national championship because they lost so much talent. So many people basically left their team, and not only just players, right? Players declared for the draft, but they lost a lot of personnel in the coaching staff. So I would be very apprehensive on thinking that LSU could come out of the SEC West again this year, especially with the same firepower, when it's obvious that their firepower is not the same. Of course, we know they have some of the best players in the country at certain positions, like at corner, like at wide receiver, but we also remember that they had a college generational quarterback that had a phenomenal, if not the best, quarterback single season in college football history, right? Joe Burrow had the best, in my opinion, single season quarterback resume of all time. National championship, most wins against top ranked division opponent, or I'm sorry, not division, but top 25 ranked teams, most wins, undefeated, beating people down, touchdowns to interception ratio. It was a masterclass of quarterbacking. He had the swagger to boot as well. It's hard to replace that. Very difficult. I don't know what they're going to do to try and replace the offensive scheme that came with being involved, that now has left to go to Carolina, right? Their head coach is now, their offensive coordinator went to become the head coach of the Carolina Panthers in the NFL. Dream job. So LSU has a lot of replacements to do. So in my opinion, the front runner has to be Alabama just because of pedigree, but we have seen before that doesn't always happen. And I think that one of the dark horse teams in all of the country, really, let alone the SEC, has to be Auburn, because Auburn has a chance. They play both of those teams. And now the fact that more SEC teams have been added to their schedule, it just boosts their odds a little bit more if they can go and handle business where they need to and get some really big wins down the road. Because if I remember correctly, Auburn finishes their season basically with LSU and Alabama. And that's a big time advantage over literally everybody else in the SEC. When you play some of the two top dogs back to back, in Alabama, you're always going to have that game against them. And the Iron Bowl is always a special game, and it has special connotations. And Auburn and Alabama fans will take that game seriously over anything else they will take that game serious no matter what. It could be Auburn could have a horrible season, but that game is still going to be marked on the schedule as something that could change anything for Alabama. But I think that Auburn has a chance to do some things. Now, moving back to the SEC East, once again, I understand Florida has had there's been some talking points about Florida currently, and that is something that you can't easily ignore. But once again, you're just looking around. What does the SEC East really have to offer right now? In fact, when have they really offered anything besides Georgia? Since 2015, right? Georgia has been a powerhouse ever since Kirby Smart has gotten there. And yes, they haven't been able to get to the biggest of dance yet again since they lost to Alabama, but they have been top class in the SEC. They have been top class across the nation ever since Kirby Smart has gotten there. And you have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he is going to continue to do what he does. His recruiting is spotless. His defense is still really, really good because a lot of people came back, and it's really likely that their new offensive weapons that they got via transfer window is going to be a strong addition to this Kirby Smart offense. It might be able to open them up because we know what they like to do. They like to play defense, like to run the ball. But if they can start spreading the ball around to some of these receivers that have become really underrated coming out of Georgia in recent time, we're going to start seeing really what this offense is capable of down there at the Arch, down there in Athens. Let's see what Georgia can do. But we're going to take another break, and we're going to come back into the podcast talking about some really, really troubling realizations going on in college sports and in fall sports in general. This is the GSMC.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, we are back here at the GSMC College Football Podcast, and boy, oh boy, it's getting real, man. It's been getting real, but it's getting much realer as the MAC conference has canceled fall football season among other fall sports as well. So they are attempting to play in the spring. So the Mid-American Conference has canceled fall sports, including football, due to health concerns and player health and safety amid the coronavirus pandemic. And that was announced Saturday. So literally a few days ago that this was going to happen. So the conference, in which is comprised of 12 members, it's the first FBS conference to announce that it was going to cancel the season. As we know, UConn became the first FBS school to cancel its season amid the pandemic, and it's an independent. It's one of the rare ones out there. But the MAC Commissioner John Steinbrecher said on a Saturday morning press conference that its decision to cancel fall sports was unanimous among league presidents. He also added that the league will make every effort possible to provide competitive opportunities in the spring, and there are simply too many unknowns to put student athletes into situations that are not clearly understood, he said. And it isn't an easy decision, but it was the right decision. And I should say that instead of student athletes, he said our. So he is only capable of doing stuff for his own conference, clearly. But this has affected also men's and women's cross country, field hockey, and men's and women's soccer and women's volleyball. So no decisions have been made regarding winter sports yet, but Stadium's Brett McMurphy first reported that MAC would cancel the fall sports after the league presidents met Saturday to vote, and the group previously met on Thursday to finalize the MAC scheduling format, and Northern Illinois president Lisa Freeman reportedly pushed for the league to not play and even suggested her school would opt out due to COVID-19 concerns. The Huskies are one of the top programs in the conference and have won 4 conference titles in the last 9 years, so the MAC was created in 1946 and currently consists of well-known schools like Akron, Ball State, Bowling Green State, Kent State, Miami, Ohio, and amongst its other 12 members. So this does have some inclinations of what is to come in the Power 5. And why do I say that? Well, things are moving in motion to postpone. So, of course, we know that the Mid-American Conference just announced that it was going to postpone fall sports in the spring. First FBS league to take the step, and it puts the other 9 in precarious positions, trying to justify playing in of itself. So there's just too many unknowns, right? And that's the biggest thing. So then the Big Ten released a statement saying that it has halted progress towards full contact practice. So from a statement, it says, "We believe that it's best to continue in the appropriate phase of activity referenced above, while we digest and share information from each campus to ensure that we're moving forward cautiously." And the conference had regularly scheduled president's meeting Saturday, with rumors percolating nationally that the wealthiest conference is considering postponing fall sports as well. So a Detroit Free Press report Saturday cited the league sources saying Commissioner Kevin Warren is in favor of a spring football season. And remember, way back when we thought that fall sports was going to be done anyway in March, in April, it was like, oh no, we can't do spring sports. We won't allow it. Bottom of the tier list of possibilities. And it just has slowly risen up, and then it shot up maybe about 2-3 weeks ago, and now it's just here. We got to be prepped and ready, because spring football probably is on the way, guys. And I know what it sounds like, but that's what it seems to be. And once again, if this does break down the collegiate season right now, we have to look at, the Ivy League once again, because for when the basketball tournaments got canceled in March, who was the first to do it? The Ivy League. The Ivy League was the first to do it again, and we're starting to see it more and more that people are starting to follow suit with things. It's starting to become a pattern. So, of course, the prominent industry source opened up something to Sports Illustrated earlier in the week, and it says, I think by the end of the week, the fall sports will be postponed in all conferences, which is quite a large statement. So it's very jarring. And Friday, of course, we know the SEC just announced who they're going to be playing for a 10-game season. And early in the week, the Big Ten and the ACC released their full schedules, and kickoff for the Big Ten was set for September 3rd. ACC is September 10th. I believe the SEC pushed it back even further, and it was the 24th. But now, many people around the sport are bracing for a decision that might be devastating both culturally and financially. And a national postponement to spring is probably the best case scenario. So we got to realize what transpired. How did this happen, right? How did we get here? So the closer we got to kickoff, the more misgivings have mounted, and there have never been unified belief at the FBS level on how to proceed. And those, cracks in the iron have become more clear as time went by, and the data did not alleviate any concerns. So Chief Medical Staff Officer Brian Hadline said Friday night on the association's weekly social series, said almost everything would have been perfectly aligned to continue moving forward at some point, but not much has aligned in recent weeks. From a national health perspective, COVID infections soared through July, and deaths have correspondingly risen during August. And from a local campus perspective, colleges have faced the reality of trying to curtail athletes outbreaks with non-bubble setting while bracing for the return of a full student body in mass. So then they have the individual athlete testimonials about lingering effects of the disease, including heart issues. And, of course, the large-scale player movements within the conference that articulate their health concerns, and then dozens of players opting out of the season. There's been a lot of players in recent time opting out. And as Power 5 source put it, the commissioner, presidents, and ADs have just started looking around and asking, what are they doing, right? How can we continue on? And so far, the answer now is pausing, and in some cases, backtracking, and perhaps ultimately a full stop. And it could be somewhat ironic if the multi-billion-dollar college football industry was felled in by the MAC conference, which would rank among either 9th or 10th in hierarchy in the 10 conference FBS. But even more specifically, it could be Northern Illinois coming off a 5-7 season that ultimately pushed the first domino. So sources told SI Friday that NIU was the school advocating the hardest for fall postponement, of course, and that they would not play if things did not go their way in the vote anyway. So ultimately the vote went the other way, and science told us what we needed to do, and health and safety was the primary concern and not any other factors. But there's an alternative viewpoint regarding the MAC decision, and it saw which direction Big Ten leaders were contemplating going and simply decided to go there first. So there's been a theory that the Big Ten, they knew what the Big Ten was going to do, said one administrator of a Group of 5 conference, and he thinks that the Pac-12 is ready to go as well as everyone else follows suit. So SI confirmed that the Pac-12 presidents have previously scheduled a meeting Tuesday. The Pac-12 has had more closely aligned with the Big Ten than any other league following the Big Ten's decision to play a conference-only schedule with their own identical decision the day later. So if the Big Ten or Pac-12 or both bail on the season, it would be virtually impossible for everybody else to continue. And it would just look too bad. How did you get a national championship out of that, right? So these next few days, in this week and some change, we're really going to start to see what's going down, because it's really, really troubling how even on the events of March 12th, when each conference independently but unanimously shut down their basketball tournaments, we're seeing something similar happening again, where too much is going on and there's an indicator of the future, but it's not guaranteed, and you can't provide certainty, but people can provide clarity. So, of course, over the last 5 months since the shutdown, March Madness and spring sports, college administrators have sought ways to avoid their worst case scenario, which was losing football season, and hopes rose and fell over the course of the summer, depending largely upon the nation's ability or failure to combat the virus. So, way back in April, a Power 5 athletic director put the specter on the fall without football in perspective, saying we're all effed. There is no other way to look at it, is there? And I remember reading this and seeing that in April, right? I remember seeing all of these things in April, where a lot of people had the foresight to believe that this is not going to be good. But then hope was still there, and people kept trying to downplay. The fact of the matter was that we should be back in a good standing by this time. But unfortunately, I don't think the nation has handled coronavirus properly. We never really fully committed to socially distancing and keeping people safe for long stints of time comparative to other places around the world. And thus, we tried to basically jumpstart the economy too quickly, sending people back to work or making people go get jobs when they couldn't, stay safe, essentially. They couldn't secure safety in the work environment. They can't secure safety in certain fields, certain professions. Like, we opened up clubs, we tried to open up movie theaters. That got backtracked in some places. Some clubs are still open, bars are still open, people are still going to beaches that were really populated. There weren't rules. Like, I saw an image the other day where in some places they have parks they have outlined circles that are socially distanced, and each person / family group people have to stay within that circle of themselves to stay 6 feet apart. That's ingenious. That is perfect. That's not everywhere though. And that's something that has to be brought to the attention of majority of places within the country just to try and salvage something, because at this point we are really looking at a dangerous time for college sports, for college athletics in the fall, for football in the fall, not just for college, but for the NFL as well. We are seeing very, very horrible things transpire within different sports, like baseball. The MLB is struggling right now dealing with the coronavirus, because every time a team has to sit down for a few days and you think, okay, this should be handled by now, another one rise up, and the season just started. And the baseball, in my opinion, isn't even that fun to watch right now with no fans. It's better than nothing, correct. It is better than nothing. But to be honest, just because something's better than nothing, it's got to work, right? If it's going to suffer from the lack of having no fans, it's got to be for a point. It has to work. And if players are still contracting coronavirus, no matter if fans are in the building or not, it is getting very, very scary. I got a source on how much someone told me the other day. Let me rephrase that. Someone told me the other day that it takes about 3,000 to maybe 5,000 people to run the MLB games through a few days. So like a Monday, a Wednesday, Friday, those sort of things. 3,000 to 5,000 people. It takes for a NFL Sunday close to 10,000 people just for a Sunday. That's a lot of individuals. That's a lot of people running in the backgrounds, a lot of people handling cameras and equipment and trying to get players ready and the game to be broadcast. Not only that, but keep in mind, like I said, the MLB does not have fans. So that's not counted in, as the NFL and some colleges have decided to say they'll have limited amounts of fans. So that means they're going to have concessions. So you have to count those people as well as stadium workers alongside of that. So that's just a whole nother factor getting involved. I, for one, am very, very interested, and I have to stay keyed in on this anyway, but stay tuned because there might be some bigger announcements coming on later on down the week that I'm sure other GSMC college football personalities will end up having to talk about, because I really don't feel like this is over yet. But we're going to take our final break of the podcast, and we're going to come back with a infamous segment of mine, Concession Confessions. We're going to be talking about beer and food pairings. Good stuff. GSMC. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, GSMC College Football Nation, we're back for the final segment of the GSMC College Football Podcast. Now, no sad faces, no long faces, no tears. We'll be back next week, with me at least. And, throughout the week, you'll hear other young, up-and-coming, awesome podcasters here at the GSMC for college football news sources and many other topics of conversation. But to finish off the podcast, my original special love letter to this podcast. Concession Confessions. We're doing another one. We're back. And it's going to be about alcohol, specifically beer, and food pairings. So the other day, I went to a socially distanced gathering of my friend. She invited me to her family gathering. It was not very many people. At the most, it was 8. And it was not 8 capacity the whole time, should I say. But we sat outside, socially distanced everything, and it was a fun time. It was tacos, brava. Listen, not my forte to pronounce things like that, but I tried my hardest. Regardless, it was delicious. I had a wonderful time, and it was with margaritas. Now, I used to not be a big margarita guy, personally. I never was a big mixed drink guy in general. Still not. But the margarita has snuck its way into my heart, because whenever I'm going to get, Mexican food, or I'm going to have any sort of cuisine like that, margaritas are always my first thing on the mind, because they just are well done. They can be really simple, and you don't have to have them super sugared out. You don't have to have them super complex. I don't really do the frozen thing either. Like, I know some people like frozen margaritas, not really my thing. Some people like the salt on the rim, not really my thing either. But all you really need for a good margarita is lime, good tequila, and some triple sec, I think. Don't quote me on that. I don't really make margaritas at home. So, wonderful things come with food and alcohol pairings. And it had me thinking while I was there, why not try to think about what pairs well for stadium food? And disclaimer, right? Stadium food is not always the tastiest. Stadium food is not always the best for you. And beer sometimes amplifies the fact that it's not the best for you. Some beers are really heavy, and that's why a lot of stadiums, a lot of venues don't sell a lot of heavier beers when you're at sporting events, because you're already eating heavy food to begin with. There are no light varieties at stadium food, unless you're going to the upscale places. Like, sometimes they have restaurants and stadiums. Like, if you are a Atlanta native and you've been to SunTrust Park, or you've been around the CNN Center, you know that there's sometimes you can find some good spots. But SunTrust Park has a lot of restaurants involved in its stadium, in its building. It's kind of like a mini town in SunTrust Park, so you can kind of go wherever. But in most traditional ballpark stadiums, you aren't going to find yourself with the healthiest of options. You're going to find some gourmet stuff that's still really, really not the best for you to eat, but who cares, right? You're there to have a good time, watch a game, and live through a memory. So we're going to live through some memories here, but through the food, alcohol, beer menu. So, first thing on the list, we got to talk about the dog, the hot dog. Hot dogs, honestly, are the most underrated food item on like any sort of list that involves multiple condiments. So you can put anything on a hot dog and it could go fly. Now, there's also, hot dogs can get really, really fancy, really, really special in different places in the country. I am from the South. We do not specialize in creating good hot dogs, but I still appreciate a good hot dog when made properly. So I think the best hot dog you can get in the South is a chili dog, because I believe our chili is A1. We figure out how to do it, and if you are at the right place, your cheese is not going to be the nacho cheese that gets taken out the can and heated up for 3 hours on a time. You don't want that cheese. It's going to make you horribly, horribly constipated. You want at least the shredded cheese. At the worst, you're going to want cheese that looks like it's real. So chili, cheese dog, you're living good life. It's a good time. And what's what you need right next to it? Hear me out, right? Just go and get yourself a Yingling light, if they have the light variety, to keep low on the calories. But a Yingling is not too heavy, but not too light. Traditional American lager can do a lot for you from a enjoyment level and from a washability level, because a hot dog can get messy, and you already know how I feel about forks and knives out there in stadium culture. If you're eating something with a fork and knife, if it's a two-handed food, you're already at a disadvantage, because let's face it, cup holders in stadiums aren't the best designed, in my opinion, because your knees are basically touching the other person's chair, the other row in front of you. So you don't really want to put too much in front of your actual sitting. And then you don't want to have to deal with the fact that if you're in a packed stadium, pre-COVID, people are just walking through aisles trying to get by you. Your food is in the way. You feel like you're in the way, but you're sitting in your seat. So you feel less confident about what you're doing as a man, and it hurts. You don't want that at all. So we know about the two-hand thing. If you have one in each, you're living a better lifestyle choice. But I digress. A chili dog can get messy, so I understand if you need to break out the fork and knife. Just understand that people probably will judge you. But I won't be one of those people, because everything in life has some sort of nuance to it. Everything's not always cut and dry. But if you are a champion of the hot dog and you know how to, in the bun is not cheap. That's another thing. If the bun is cheap, you're going to have a bad time. If the bun is of good quality, you can get away with so much more as a hot dog connoisseur. That rhymed accidentally, and I love that. But we're going to go with the Yingling right there, American lager, good taste, good variety, good flavor. Boom. Next, we have to keep going on the traditional route before we start to get a little bit more varied, but we have to go with the sandwich. Because I can't just say burgers, because there's been a lot more sandwich varieties out there in the stadium culture. So we have chicken sandwiches, we have pulled pork sandwiches, we have brisket sandwiches, and of course we have specialty hamburgers that are technically sandwiches. So that can be eaten with one hand, of course, but you may not want to do that. Things can get messy depending how big the burger is. But a burger is nice if, depending on the beef quality, if it's like Angus or if it's made from different chunks of different meat. But most times you're not going to get some super gourmet burger at a ballpark. But you will find yourself a Corona. And now I gotta admit, man, I like Coronas every now and again. They're not my favorite Mexican beer of choice. I'm much more a Modelo type of guy. I don't do Dos Equis because the last time I had one, I felt like I was going to projectile my food back out. Now, I don't blame Dos Equis for this. Now, keep in mind, I don't blame them. It's just the relationship between that moment and Dos Equis. I can't do it. It's like when you eat too much food and then the last thing you eat and something bad happens. And now you cannot, no matter what the cause was, you just have to X out that food item along with the other list of food items that you ate at that time. You have to remove them from your life. That's what happened to Dos Equis, unfortunately for them, in my book. But Modelo doesn't really showcase itself in a lot of stadiums unless, of course, you are going to an MLS game or a game that has a lot of Hispanic heritage and a lot of culture from, Latin America or from Hispanic people. So you're not going to see a lot of Mexican beers. You're not going to see a lot of beers that are of that demographic. but I enjoy a quality Mexican beer when I can find one. Corona's not the best, but it does the job. And I feel like it pairs well with a good hamburger. Does the job. Quite nice. We have to go with nachos because nachos are very popular and people will eat them no matter what. So we're going to pair nachos and stacked fries together because that's just kind of pointless to talk about them separately. But we're going to go with that. Here is the thing, right? Here is the thing. You don't want to have a beer that is heavy, so we're not going to go with the Budweisers, right? We're not going to do that. We can go Bud Light, but I don't drink Bud Light personally. It's not my drink of choice. Typically stay away. You can go Heineken, but Heineken is very polarizing depending on people, what they like to drink. Some people like it, some people don't. I'm not the biggest Heineken fan, but it definitely works in this case because it is of one of the lighter variety beers and you can kind of just down it and go. And as we know, and it is a imported beer from a different country, and it's in a country that has a lot of heavier food choices. And when you're dealing with heavier food, you can't have the super big time heavier drinks, beverages, because you're going to feel bloated and you're not at home. So you can't just go sit and take a nap. If you take a nap at the game, you wasted your money. And also you might hurt your back because the seats aren't that comfortable unless you're in like the suites or something. Then it doesn't matter. Everything else is off the table. We don't talk about suite culture here at the GSMC because we are not in the suites just yet. So Heinekens, you can do Bud Light, but I don't really drink it like that. Stay light, stay easy. Don't tap into Guinness. You're gonna lose your mind. Don't do that. Don't, please. If anything, stay away from Guinnesses. Stay away from those sort of heavier stout beers, if they even have them. Stay away from the craft beers. You might get away with some IPAs. Shout out to Printer's Ale. They don't have that many IPAs, but Printer's Ale is a local brewery here in Georgia. They do great different variety of beers, but stay away from those. Stay away from the stouts. Stay away from the heavy alcohol tolerant levels. So like the 9%, leave them alone. Stay away. But to wrap this up, we got one more. We got to talk about wings because wings are important and they're my favorite thing to talk about. And it goes along with my favorite beverage to have with wings and along with, really, it was my favorite beer for a solid 6.5 months of recent. Michelob Ultra, man. So wings with Michelob Ultra are a pairing made in heaven. They are the Shaq and Kobe of the food game. They are the D Wade and LeBron James of the food game. They are the, I don't know, they are the Marquise Colston, the Drew Brees of the food game. They just work. They make sense. It feels good. And it tastes well. They complement each other. One isn't too heavy than the other. If you're leaving out the fries in the equation, it is a match made in heaven. Just go ahead and do it. I promise you, you won't regret it. But that'll be it for the GSMC College Football Podcast for today. So thank you all for listening. I'm glad and I'm just so thankful that you guys continue to rock with us and listen to us on a weekly basis. It makes me happy. It makes everybody else really, really happy what they're doing. And it makes us all want to improve and bring better content to you guys on every single podcast that we do. So don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It helps us out so much when you do that. Also, don't forget to follow us on our social media, our Facebook, Instagram, and our Twitter, GSMC College Football. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned and keep on keeping on. It's the GSMC.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast. part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.